Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So I decided to do a video about a story I read a couple years ago in the History of Jasper by Megan Powers about a tribe that was allegedly slaughtered around 1840, only feet from the current CN tracks that run along the west side of the Athabasca River. The story was very intriguing despite the fact that it barely took up half a page and was printed in about 8-point font. It was more anecdotal to other things that were happening at that time, especially around Jasper House, which was an outpost originally established under the Northwest Company, the Northwest Company being the primary competitor to the Hudson's Bay Company in the fur trade. When I tried looking for more information about it, it was very difficult to find. I eventually did find some contemporary sources, which I will talk about shortly. Even still, I'm a bit surprised that the story has been overshadowed for as long as it has. Not far downstream from Jasper House National Historic Site, where the Athabasca and Snake Indian rivers join at a cold confluence in Jasper National Park, lays the site of a fatal ambush that would later come to be known as the Snake Indian Massacre. There are no gravestones, no plaques, nor interpretive trails attesting to the horrific event, yet the story has been repeated and reinterpreted over multiple accounts, each version varying slightly from the last. According to these oral histories, the Snake Indian tribe that was inhabiting the Athabasca River Valley was slaughtered by their enemies, the Assiniboine. Only 3 young girls, sisters, were able to escape into the wilderness. Only one of them, however, was ever heard from again. A first-hand account was transcribed by a Belgian missionary named Pierre-Jean Desmet in 1846, and later by Henry John Mobberly in 1861 after he returned to his post at Jasper House. The first, Desmet, recounted the following. The history of a poor young woman, one of their number, deserves to be recorded as it affords a lively picture of the dangers and afflictions to which these unfortunate people are often exposed. When she was about 15 years of age, her father, mother, and brothers, together with another family of her nation, were surprised in the wood by a party of Assiniboine warriors and massacred without mercy. At the time of this horrid scene, the young girl was in another part of the forest with her 2 sisters, both younger than herself. They succeeded in concealing themselves, and thus escaped falling into the hands of the assassins. The hapless orphan wandered about the desert for 2 years, without meeting any human being, without knife or hatchet, making her fire by means of 2 pieces of wood, subsisting on roots, wild fruits, and porcupines. In winter she sheltered herself in the abandoned den of a bear. The sisters left her at the end of the first year, since which they have never been heard of. At length, after 3 years, she was fortunately found by a good Canadian, who took her home, provided her with comfortable food and clothing, and 6 months after restored her to her tribe. Desmet postulated that though the term Snake Indian may have been derived from a tribe that occupied parts of the United States, the term may have been used in a derogatory sense to describe any tribe deemed to be weak. As for the Snake Indians in the Athabasca River Valley, Desmet speculated that they had possibly migrated from British Columbia in search of food before settling in the area just north of Jasper House. Mobberly's version, which he later published in his memoir When Fur Was King, offers significantly more detail, albeit some variations, than Desmet's account. He states that the young survivor's tribe had consisted of approximately 20 families and provides a name for the "good Canadian" who rescues the girls. He writes, "The Snakes at the time of which I write were camped on the side of a mountain west of the post, and a band of Assiniboines at Lac Brule just below the entrance to the pass. The Assiniboines proposed a meeting at the head of the lake for the purpose of ratifying a peace, each band to come unarmed. The Snakes agreed, and the men of the band, leaving their guns, arrived and were placed in the inner circle round the council fire. The Assiniboines, however, concealed their guns under their blankets and at a prearranged signal drew them and shot down in cold blood every man of their ancient enemies. They then rushed to the Snake camp and wiped out the rest of the band, with the exception of 3 young women whom they brought as prisoners to Fort Assiniboine. Here they were stripped, bound, and placed in a tent to be tortured and finally dispatched at a great scalp dance to be held next day. During the night a French half-breed, Belrose by name, crept into the lodge where the prisoners lay and cut their bonds. All he could provide them with was his scalping knife and a fire bag containing flint, steel, and punk. The women made their escape and followed the Athabasca River to its junction with the Baptiste. Here they could not agree as to their further course. 2 decided to follow the Athabasca, the 3rd the Baptiste. The 2, making a raft and taking with them the fire bag, crossed the Baptiste and were never afterwards heard of." In this passage, Mobberly describes how the Snake Indians were tricked into disarming themselves by the Assiniboine and were subsequently slaughtered. After the men were killed, the assailants then continued to the Snake Indian encampment, probably at the base of either Roche Desmet or Coronach Mountain, and slaughtered what remained of them with the exception of 3 girls. They are taken hostage to Fort Assiniboine, just over 300 kilometers downstream, where they await their execution. Miraculously, a half-breed, which is an archaic term for someone of the Métis community, named Belrose, sets them free and equips them with whatever tools he had on his person at the time, which included a knife and fire bag containing flint, steel, and punk. For reference, a fire bag was a deerskin pouch that usually contained the wearer's pipe, as well as smoking materials such as tobacco and dried willow bark that was attached to the belt for traveling. Punk is a soft fibrous kind of wood that has been decomposed by fungus and is usually used as kindling. By the time Desmet initially records the story in 1846, the Belrose family had already begun to establish itself in St. Albert, just outside of Edmonton, with Olivier Belrose as the patriarch, who himself was not Métis, but his wife and children were. Olivier was actually a French-Canadian according to official documents and had moved to the area from Quebec in 1830 at the age of 18 and married a woman named Josette Savard. It's very likely that Olivier is the man in the story if these events ever occurred. Unfortunately, there are no known documents, diaries or journals or otherwise, that he kept to confirm this, or at least none that survived to this day. The three girls follow the Athabasca River upstream until they come to a fork when the Athabasca and Baptiste rivers meet. The Baptiste was also called the Baptiste-Berlin River at the time, and later renamed simply as the Berlin River, which is situated about 76 kilometers northwest of present-day Edson. Mobberly then goes on to say, "The third, left only with the knife, traveled up the Baptiste some 30 miles and there made preparations for wintering. Berries were still to be had. She managed to kill a few squirrels and with the sinews from their tails made snares for rabbits. She killed some porcupines and groundhogs too, dried them, and out of the rabbit skins made herself a dress. She kindled a fire in the primitive way, by revolving the point of one dry stick rapidly in a hole made in another, and collected a large pile of dry wood. By the time winter had set in, she was prepared for it. Thus she lived until midsummer, gathering gum from the poplars and making dried meat from rabbits and other small animals she killed. Then she removed several days' journey to another good hunting ground. 3 months later, an Iroquois hunter wandering far from his accustomed haunts came upon a series of strange tracks and traces. They puzzled him. He was unable to decipher what kind of animal could have made them. So many tales of Wendigos and other mysterious beings were current that none thought it worthwhile to travel so far to look into this one, and for a time the whole matter died out. A Wendigo, or the more common spelling variation Wendigo, is a malevolent being from Aboriginal folklore, largely from Algonquin-speaking nations, which is said to haunt the forests of Canada and the northern United States. It is sometimes described as a corporeal beast that moves effortlessly over ice and snow, while other times it is considered to be a spirit in search of a human to possess and compel into a cannibalistic frenzy. In either case, Wendigos are often associated with winter and famine. So essentially, this man thought he was possibly looking at Wendigo footprints or something to that effect and gave up his search, probably trying to avoid trouble, which was very unfortunate for the survivor because she was really, really close to being found. Mobberly then goes on to say the following. Next summer, however, when the hunters were encamped some little distance from the Baptiste, this man decided to return to the spot and try to find out what animal had made the mystifying tracks. He struck the river where the snake woman was living, saw snares set, trees barked, and fresh prints in the ground that resembled those of a human being. He was sure he had now run upon a real Wendigo, and, being a plucky man, determined to hunt and kill him. Creeping around cautiously with his gun at full cock and prepared at any moment to be pounced upon, he came to a high bank where an immense collection of dry wood with a little fire near it was piled not far from the entrance to a small cave. He could see no other signs of life. He hid himself close to the cave, and presently a wild creature in a short skirt of rabbit skins approached with a load of rabbits. Throwing down the pack, this grotesque object picked up some sticks with which to replenish the fire, and recognizing the sex, the hunter knew at once that she must be one of the 3 women who had escaped 2 years before from the Assiniboine. Noticing him, at length she made a frenzied effort to escape but was soon overtaken. She had become perfectly wild, and he had much difficulty in bringing her to the camp. She remained with his family for 2 years. Then the officer in Jasper House kept her for another 2 years as servant to his wife, at the end of which time she married a shoe swap. She was the only survivor of her tribe. So this is a map of Jasper House and surrounding area that was sketched in 1925 by Mobberly, who also noted the site of the supposed massacre by the Assiniboine River, which was later renamed the Snake Indian River in memory of the fallen tribe. A third version, retold by trapper and packer James Shand Harvey, who emigrated to Canada from Scotland in 1905, heard the tragedy of the Snake Indians from an elderly Iroquois woman named Swedick, who he figured to be about 20 years old and living at Jasper House at the time of the incident. In his retelling, the young survivor travels upriver to the Berlin Lake area close to the territory primarily inhabited by the Iroquois, and it is here that she is found by an Iroquois hunter from Grand Cache, which is located just outside of Wilmore Wilderness Park in Alberta. Historical speculation has also led to the name Sekak, attributed to the sole survivor in the milestone work A Hard Road to Travel, as well as a collection of local tales that was published by the Grand Cache Historical Society called Legends of Grand Cache and the Yellowhead. Unfortunately, lack of archaeological evidence has thus far relegated these events to legend. Perhaps one day, though, a discovery will be made that will lend itself to Sekak's courageous life and the fate of her tribe, and her story will be remembered for decades, if not centuries more, to come.